Steve, thanks so much for coming on the show. Let's look at some of your health journey, because a lot of people know that you're diabetic. A lot of people know about colitis. A lot of people may know about testosterone. I think the thing that's interesting is, whilst lots of people have medical problems, they don't also tend to win multiple gold medals. So the two don't naturally go hand in hand, I would say.
It's pretty fair saying that.
Yeah. Just going back a little bit then, what brought you into rowing?
Heavily dyslexic, so I was rubbish at school. Went to a small comprehensive in Marlow, Buckinghamshire. And the head of the English department was a love and coached rugby and rowing. And that we weren't a rowing school. And he just looked at the size of hands and feet of people as they came in their first year. And if they had big hands and feet, they were likely to grow into big people. Rowing is a leverage sport. So that's why we're all tall. It's that you think and look like you're pulling the oar through the water. What you're doing is reaching as far as you possibly can, placing the blade in the water, and then levering the boat past that position. So it's simple physics. It took me 10 years to work out. It was a swimmer that I realised that length of stroke was important. It wasn't about power that I suppose there is. So he asked a few individuals. There were 12 of us from my year group. And after 2 weeks of doing it on sports afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, where you're allowed out of school. So being a dyslexic, being allowed out of school to go and do something, that was always top of the list. And 4 of us all fell in love with it. And that's how it all started, really.
Tell me a little bit more then, because essentially it's supposed to be a medical podcast. The colitis was the first thing that hit you, wasn't it?
Yes.
How did that present?
We were away on a training camp in South Africa, and I got food poisoning, and that was put onto some medication to help me through that period. By the time I got home, it had cleared up, but within 2 or 3 weeks, I started getting the symptoms coming back. And you're just thinking, well, okay, it's just kicked in again, and so you sort of try and work out. I didn't stop training during the whole period, and it just got worse and worse. Without going into too much detail, you go to the toilet quite a lot. So I was waking up in the morning, going to the toilet, having breakfast, getting in the car, going to training at Henley. First stop was the toilet. Go for a warm-up run. It's only a little shoe shuffle, warm-up jog down the towpath, come back, go to the toilet. Then you've got to try and last an hour and a half to 2 hours out on the boat, depending on what training session it is.
Yeah.
And then the first stop from that is a very quick rush back to the toilet. And that's how your day run.
And you did this for how long?
It was going through tests and all sorts of different things. My performance didn't drop off. It tailed off slowly. And you sort of convince yourself that you're going to be fine. We had trials coming up in a few weeks' time, and eventually that I was sent off to go and see a specialist. My wife's the team doctor. She was an amateur volunteer for the team then. She's now been a professional since 2009, I think, with lottery funding. Our support team to our rowing team is second to none to any country now, and that's why we're consistently at the top of the pile from that. And I went and saw a consultant, and he said, okay, and run down a list of about 15 things. And at the bottom of that list was ulcerative colitis. And he said, it can't be that, because you wouldn't be able to do the training and stuff that you are
it should
you are doing.
Out. You know, it should
I was pretty wiped out.
Okay. Yeah.
But it didn't stop me training. Because there is a commitment and a loyalty to the people you were. At that time, I was rowing a pair with Matt Pinson, and that you may know that it's your fault that the boat's not going well, but there's a process of not blaming each other, but there is a process that there's other factors involved. When my performance was getting so bad, and the way you know it's the test on the rowing machine, because you've got a digital readout telling you what you can't do anymore. We were getting quite close to international racing season. It was in the Barcelona Olympic year. So I went along to see Dr. Parkins. He was a specialist at Charing Cross when my wife was studying. And he gave me a biopsy of my colon, which was probably one of the worst experiences. Not the procedure itself, but afterwards you feel like you've been kicked in the stomach several times. And I can remember going into the hospital, the Hammersmith area, my wife driving me back afterwards. And once we got over the Chiswick flyover, we had to pull over for me to puke up over the side.
It is the Chiswick flyover. So
yeah, no, it makes a lot of people sick. It's not a fun place to spend a lot of your life, which I have done.
Especially not after a biopsy.
Yeah, but as I say, that I kept training through the whole period. So I only missed that day, the day I went in for the biopsy. I was back training the next day, and the results came back 2 days later, confirming it was ulcerative colitis, and put me on to the correct treatment from that. And because I trained right the way through that period, my performance bounced back relatively quickly.
Yeah.
That if you stop training saying I'm ill, it got to 8 weeks before the Barcelona Games. I was diagnosed of 10 weeks before, and I didn't know, but Jürgen Grobler, my coach, spoke to Matthew and said, well, give Steve another 2 weeks. If he's not showing an improvement, we've got to look for doing something else.
Wow.
I didn't know that at the time. You learn about these things afterwards. So that's how close it was. It wasn't about going to the games and performing badly. I wasn't going to even get selected to go. So what was I there? 2-time Olympic champion coming into those games. We were world record holders the year before, smashing all our opposition. We'd lost the domestic trials against Johnny and Greg Searle. We raced them 2 weeks later at the first international regatta and beat them and won the event. We went to Essen 2 weeks after that. We came third on the first day. On the second day, there's different competitions, separate competitions on each day. And we didn't make the final for the second day. We came in our worst ever performance together, Matt and I, and the chairman and the selectors there, and said, you're selected to go to the games. Now go away and sort yourselves out and get ready for the games. You don't have to race again, which we didn't race at the last international regatta. So on our worst performance, we got selected to go.
Right, I've just been told that a whopping 97% of our viewers aren't subscribed to the show. If you are happy to, please press subscribe, as it really helps us to grow Man Alive, and it supports men's health even more. So thanks so much for your help. And how old were you when you had the colitis diagnosis?
Colitis was 92, so 30.
30. And then how long before the diabetes kicked in?
Diabetes was 3 years before Sydney, so 97.
Wow. Okay, and then
we finished that season. We traditionally have 2 to 3 weeks off where you do very, very little. I went away on holiday, did all sorts of weird and wonderful things. The hotel that we were in the Caribbean had a trapeze outside our room. So I ended up being in doing the show at the end of the week of one of the guests having a go at it. Because I'm so tall, big wingspan is the safety net. I have to lift my feet up because they'd be dragging along the safety net. It was quite fun. And I got back, did the first day of training, and just had a tremendous thirst, which is not unusual for the type of activity we do. We don't drink out of glasses. We have jugs at Leander Club, and you just fill that up with squash, and just of trying to get fluids back into the system. But when I got home, it was 2 relatively light sessions, probably 2 times 16 kilometers, so 32k in a day. Got home and I was still thirsty. And I don't know what triggered it. Is my wife being the team doctor, that when we're away on hot training camps, we take urine dipsticks away. And there's 6 or 7 different pads on there. And we're only looking for the pH of almost an educational in some ways of have you drunk enough? Give samples in the morning. Have you drunk enough the next day? And that's the sort of educational side of it. And I don't know why I did it, but I did one of these tests because over the sheer boredom of the years of doing these things, you get to know of what the others are on there. And some, like the pH is obviously a sliding scale of colour. Most are negative or positive on that, the dipsticks that we use. And the one that had sugar in the urine, didn't relate that to diabetes, came out positive. My wife was running her own practice at that time, so I rang her up and she said, "Oh, you better go and make an appointment for your GP." Being a top athlete in those days is that I got to see my GP the following morning.
And it was the 90s.
Yeah.
So you could anyway.
Yeah, no, not quite. Not quite, but they took my blood sample and tested my blood sugar levels were through the roof, and I went and saw a specialist that afternoon at Wickham General Hospital, a guy called Ian Gallen, who's looked after my diabetes ever since. Spent about 3 hours with him, and I was expecting him to tell me that my rowing career was over. You can't compete with diabetes. My grandfather had diabetes. He was late 60s when he came down with it. I knew that it was in the family somewhere along. I didn't know my grandfather. He died when I was relatively young. But the stories that spin around that I knew he was diabetic. And you think your first thoughts are, after the 3 hours of consultant, Ian said to me, he said, I don't see why you can't compete and achieve your dreams of winning your 5th Olympic gold medal. And I was thinking, I wasn't expecting that. If he'd told me I couldn't have carried on, would I have accepted it? I don't know. But he was relatively young, very forward thinking, and his process was, why not? He's become, from me and a lot of other diabetics that he's looked after, now he's sort of become the expert in sport and diabetes.
Do you think there was ever a time when you had, you diagnosed, you got diabetes, you got colitis, you just think, I'm just going to jack it in. It's like, it's just too much stuff.
Well, I thought on that day, when I went up to see Ian Gallen, I thought that was it. My career was over. When he said, I see why not, you can't carry on, that motivated me to carry on. But when I came down with of the diabetes, and then the colitis flared up as well, so dealing with the two conditions at the same time, again, my performance tailed off. It was more in the middle of the winter than the spring when I had the colitis the first time around. But we're dealing with both conditions, and my performance was awful. And there was no lottery. We don't get prize money. We don't get appearance money. We're basically volunteer athletes before lottery funding came on. So there's no contracts that you have to do this, and this, because nobody's paying you. So you can do really what you want. My coaches didn't like me going away skiing, but I used to love skiing. So of when Jürgen was coaching me, he would go back to Germany for Christmas for a couple of weeks. I used to go away skiing for a week. That this particular time, my performance was awful going into it, and really struggling more with the colitis than the diabetes at that time. And I ended up being there for 2 weeks. And I thought, that's it, I'm not coming back. Came back, we had trials 10 days later, so I haven't really trained apart from doing a bit of skiing. But I finished 4th in the trial, which I wasn't expecting to, with only Matt, James and Tim above me, so the Sydney 4. And we did a pairs matrix, which you get to row over a certain distance with different partners all the time, and then your time is averaged down. And so even though that I was really struggling health-wise, I was still fourth on the team. And so you think, okay, perhaps I can do it. Perhaps if I do get a little better, I'm only going to push myself up those rankings. And that's the way it happened.
Shall we take a look at some of your bloods?
Why not?
Obviously, we do a lot of bloods when we try and look at your health screen here. And I think you're somebody who is, I don't know, prodded and poked more than a lot of people that we have on.
I would guess so.
So in theory, a lot of this shouldn't be a surprise. I think the thing I found quite surprising was that you're not running the Olympics now, right? So you shouldn't be as healthy as you are, but a lot of your bloods are pretty good. Like, it's not bad stuff. All your core health markers are good. You know, your immune system's good, your full blood count's good, your kidneys, your liver, all these sort of things which over the years of being on immunosuppressive drugs like the azathioprines or insulins could be causing fatty liver and all this sort of stuff, you'd expect to see some problems, but it's good stuff. You know, if you looked at your set of bloods for your core health, your full blood count, your kidneys, your liver, your inflammatory markers, you wouldn't know, which is nice. It's probably a testament to your
sounds pretty good
previous physiology and effort. Your HbA1c, your diabetes, which I'm sure you run through all the time, it was 57.
Okay, well, I'm on the old scale, so you have to try.
7.4.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Now, and I appreciate everyone is different, but from a purely true marker for those people that don't know, we class 48 or less as not diabetic, 42 or less is not even impaired glucose, and 57 for a long-standing diabetic isn't bad. And obviously, it would be really nice if you get even better, but I'm certainly not going to tread on the toes of your endocrinologist and suggest that anything would change. Because, of course, the pump's doing a lot of that for you now, isn't it?
Well, that's the difference now. When I first started being a diabetic, you were drawing your insulin from a vial into a syringe and injecting that way. And then the pen system got introduced, which is like a big fat pen, which you put a cartridge of insulin in, and you just turn the top to how many units of insulin, stab it in and press the top. And that's how you give the dose now, up until that. And then you move to the pump. I've probably been on pump for 15 years. I'm on the second generation of pump now, but they're starting to get a little bit of a brain. So if my blood sugar level starts creeping up, it will give you a little bit more insulin. That's what the old pump did. But more is better is that when your blood sugar levels are starting to go down, it will adjust your level. So you don't have the hypos as much. But it's just a thing that you have to get used to and think about. Very few occasions in racing that I had issues. Lucerne Regatta, which is the top international regatta of the season in Switzerland, lovely little town. They've got a natural 2,000 meter lake. If you're going to choose one venue where rowing would be for the rest of the time, it would be at that venue. But you walk out of the town, it's a 20-minute walk. Obviously, that is a little bit of exercise. And so that I got to, it was semi-finals day, and we meet by the boat an hour before. We go through race tactics. I test my blood sugar levels again, because that was in the days that I was doing it manually. I noticed that I'd gone down and needed something, sent the physio off to buy 2 Mars bars. The other 3 went for a warm-up run. I sat on a bench right by the lake, eating 2 Mars bars, all our oppositions running past, seeing everyone else doing their warm-up run, and I'm sitting there eating Mars bars. Not quite what a sort of a pre-warm-up session that you would do.
No, but it's a good advert for Mars bar.
Yeah.
At least it was when it was
I suppose it's not my favourite go-to chocolate.
No.
But it's basically whatever you can get your hands on.
The rest of your blood's pretty good. Cholesterol's good. Your thyroid levels are good. Your vitamin levels all look very good. Vitamin D, folic acid, iron levels, all nice and healthy. Now, your testosterone is 21 nanomoles per litre, and I understand you're on testosterone replacement therapy anyway, aren't you?
Yeah.
There are 1 or 2 other bits around your testosterone that aren't as good. So, for example, your binding protein, your SHBG, if you're familiar with SHBG.
No idea what you're talking about.
Total testosterone is just the amount of testosterone that flows around in your blood, and that's what you're either producing or you're taking as a medicine. A bit like when you inject your insulin, it's how much is in your system. Similar analogy. The weird thing about testosterone is you have available or bioavailable, and you have the total, and they're not the same. So as a fit, healthy individual with normal levels, you'd have about 97% bound testosterone. So that total gets squeezed down. So you only have about 3% usable. And the thing that binds most to testosterone is SHBG. So if that level's high, your usable testosterone is even less. So even if your level says 21 and it says, oh, that's pretty good, because your SHBG is so high, you actually don't have as much testosterone as you think. So we do find quite a few patients will get their testosterone done. They go, oh, it's 20. I feel fine. It's just really good. It must be okay. But actually their free testosterone is the thing you want to look at. So there is an element of you would alter your treatment based off your free, not your total necessarily. The key is, I think the treatments have come on so much in the last few years that you should be finding the one that gives you the optimal level. And I think we've moved way past the point of here's just replacing it. We should be now, what can we do to really optimize those levels? What can we do to get your free and available testosterone to right up where they should be? Because if you're going to have to be on the stuff, you want to be the best you can be, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, completely agree.
As a grandfather now, I want to be around for a good length of time and enjoy life. I've worked pretty hard at doing the stuff that I did, even though it was fun doing it. But it was pretty of grueling in some ways, and I feel that I've earned a process to enjoy life a little bit more.
Yeah,
unfortunately, as I said before, there's no prize money, appearance money in rowing, so I have earned my fortune from that. So I can sit back and retire. So I have to keep working, even though I'm close to of state pension element, which is not going to keep my lifestyle going the way I want. So I've got to carry on working of some sort. So my life has to have flexibility, and the better your health can be with all the conditions that I have. So I'm pretty pleased in some ways.
Yeah.
That you're saying overall is pretty good.
I'd love to keep answering questions from your comments in episodes. So comment below your thoughts on this episode or general health topics you'd love for me to address. I read every single one. It's a good point going back to the fact that you have to transition from being away from professional sport. We've had a lot of rugby players on and people that have had that relatively short-lived career. How do you then transition away from that to not doing 4 training sessions a day?
That's the whole mental process of it.
Yeah.
Well, which is
what did you do after?
Different. I went through depression.
Wow.
For me, that didn't happen until 12 years after I retired, because as I retired in 2000, end of 2000, within 3 weeks, I was asked if I'd come down to London for a coffee. Sat on a street outside a cafe with the chief executive and chair of the British Olympic Association, and says, "We're thinking about bidding for 2012. Would you come onto the team?" Obviously, the answer was yes. Again, on the team as a volunteer, and so I was the 4th person to be involved. So there was the chief executive, the chair, and an ex-hockey player who was out in Sydney doing a sort of behind the scenes of seeing could we possibly put a bid together for London. So my Olympic dream carried on for another 12 years. One of trying to convince my roles was to convince the mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, who was known to be a sports hater.
Yep.
He was a piece of cake.
Oh, I was going to say someone else. Oh, thank God, it's a funny show.
I remember going to his offices, that he was signing loads of documents, and I thought that my 2 roles was the government and Ken. And Ken looked up at me and he says, "You think I'm going to be anti, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do."
That's almost like an impression of him as well, I've noticed.
And he said, "I saw what the games did for Barcelona, which changed Barcelona."
Oh, yeah.
It's now one of the romantic destinations to go. Before the 92 Olympics,
Yeah.
it was a dump. That there were coming out of being heavy industry of the docks, which were all quieted down. And so Ken saw that and saw what he could do. And he was absolutely fantastic. It took us another 18 months to convince Tony Blair to come on board. Once he did, again, he was fantastic. But it took a lot of convincing for him to be bringing the government on board. So my Olympic dream, going back to the original question, sort of carried on till 2012. I went to a lot of Paralympics as well as the Olympics itself. But I watched the closing ceremony at home of the Paralympics, and when the cauldron was put out, almost immediately there was sort of this shadow came over, thinking, well, what are you going to do now? There was this emptiness.
Yeah.
Even though that I wasn't an athlete for 12 years, but I was heavily still involved on a day-to-day basis of the whole process. And I was just thinking, what am I going to do now? By that time, I was doing some commentary for the BBC. Had other things, excuse me, other things in my life. So it wasn't just as an athlete of being the next day, what are you going to do? That, of course, being a bloke, we don't tend to do anything about it. Having a doctor as a wife, you don't really talk about it. But I think I dealt with it pretty well. It took me 9 years before I went and saw my GP.
Yeah, that is pretty good. 9 years.
Yeah, for a bloke, I think. We don't have the same discussions as females do.
I agree.
That they get into a group and they'll chat around and feel sorry for each other. Blokes, you say you've got a problem, and the others will take the mickey out of you.
Do you think that's changing now?
Yes and no. I think that the emphasis is still taking the mickey, and you'd be surprised if it didn't happen. But there's also of a tap on the shoulder, one-to-one, and saying, why don't you go and do this? Or certainly with my experiences of that I can give those advice, not just on the conditions that I've got, but of other areas. As being an elite athlete, you have to respond as immediately as you possibly can. And you're pretty in tune with your body. But as a layperson, which I've been for the last 26 years, is that that it's more of a struggle, and trying to go and see a GP because they're doing podcasts and things like that.
Oh God, that's awkward.
It's not as easy. It's that you can wait 3 or 4 weeks.
Do you think then it was the 12 years after that was your lowest moment?
Yeah. After 2012.
Yeah.
The 9 to 12 years, I still not over it completely.
Yeah.
There is still an emptiness in your life. When you did what I did for 25 years, from a 14-year-old right the way through of competing at 5 Olympics, and if you take competing at the first to the last, that's 16 years of competing just outside of it. As I say, I don't think I had any problems in the next 12 years because 2012 Olympics sort of took over in some ways.
Yeah.
But there was just an emptiness and thinking, well, what is the point to life? Sad to say in some ways.
Yeah.
The elite sports in America, they've got more to grips with it better now. But if you're involved in the of 3 big sports of basketball, American football, and baseball, is that from a very young age, you're guided through. You're in a team. You're being looked after. You're traveling. You're earning very big money as well, and then suddenly it's all over. And the suicide rate is very high in those particular sports. Through a certain period, as I say, they're getting better at it now, which you think they've got finance, they've got a fantastic lifestyle, but there's this emptiness of what you did day in, day out, and what drove you to be a top athlete. You can't just switch that off.
Yeah. I think it's quite telling because you go through all these really serious or potentially serious physical illnesses, and you've sort of described them as if they were problems, things that were challenges, but you carried on and you got through and you did the next bit. And the thing that really hits you is not the physical problem, it's the mental hit of, well, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Which is insane if you think about it. It's just, wow, how you can get through one thing, but it keeps you going.
You mentioned in the quick fire about of dancing on ice. I always said I'd never do programs like that. I've been on an ice rink a few times when the kids were young, and you get the skates, and you sort of hire skates and charge around. Being a rower, your balance is pretty good. Even though there's a saying, if you can't catch, throw, or kick, you end up being a rower, because it is a very coordinated sport. But we have a lot of uncoordinated people in the sport. The way that I can describe it is that if you play golf and you go to a driving range, you have a bucket of balls and you get into a rhythm. But you go and play golf, you only have one ball and you hit it, walk, try and find it, think about it before you've even got there. And it's very different. And rowing is more like being on a driving range where you're just getting in a rhythm of hitting ball after ball. Rowers that do play a little bit of golf and go to the driving range love it because it's very close to what they used to do. And at the end, the bucket that you collected the balls in will probably go down there as well because you're in that rhythm of doing it.
One of the most important things I've learned being a doctor for over 20 years, specializing in men's health, is that knowing what your testosterone level is probably one of the best indicators of what your current and future health could be. Man Alive is brought to you by Voy. They are offering a 20% discount on a testosterone blood test to all of our listeners. So all you need to do is click on the link in the description below and make sure you use the code MANALIVE. I suppose, does that play into the whole, was it if anybody sees me near a boat again, they have permission to shoot me phrase, but you're pulled straight back in?
I don't know where that came from.
It has stuck with you.
It has stuck. That I didn't even realize I'd said it. I used a 4-letter word that I shouldn't have used as well. Within rowing, that you're out on the water. You cross the finishing line. There's a lot of emotion going around, but you stay in your boat for 15, 20 minutes. You paddle back up the course, the next race comes down, you get on the course and then come into the medal rostrum. So you're not in that situation where you've got a giving an interview, where athletics, you'll see people, not so much now because they come off the track, but they used to be there with the mic as they cross the line of shoving a mic in there, giving them a bunch of flowers and a drink that they wouldn't drink because of anti-doping. You wouldn't give anything. You wouldn't drink anything that's given you from that point of view. But we're never in that situation. In Atlanta, they put a landing stage just after the finishing line. So as we crossed the line, you drifted into there and gave an interview. I've never been in that experience before. And that's where I used the 4-letter word that I shouldn't have done and came out with that quote that I didn't even know that I said. The second week of the games, my son wasn't born, but my 2 daughters, we promised that we would take them down to go and see Mickey Mouse. So that's where I was for the second week of the games. And then came back of home. And then this statement kept being thrown back to me of my wife. Competed at Olympic Games. She was in LA in '84, our first games together. She was 5th in the women's, was a silver and bronze medalist at the Commonwealth Games 2 years later than that, became the team doctor in 1990 and still been in that role ever since. But she gets overlooked on that. A great athlete in her own right, of a great support to the team for many, many years, but doesn't really get the recognition that she deserved. So I got a phone call. Sometimes you get invited to a palace. It normally comes through a letter. That this was a phone call and said, would you come down to lunch? The Queen would like to be a guest at a lunch table.
Right.
And I said, yeah, no, that I can do that day.
Yeah, I think I can squeeze it in my calendar.
Is it all right if I bring my wife? Oh, no, sorry, sir. There's only 12 guests.
Oh, shit.
That's a bit different. Matthew was invited as well. Is that the Queen and Duke were sat in a big oval table. They were sat on the narrow side of the oval. At the end of the oval were two house guests that work in the palace, and they get the opportunity to come. And then there were of two people on either side of the Queen and Duke. And Matthew and I were sort of sitting diagonally opposite each other, but not next to the Queen and Duke. And there was lots of conversations that went around the table. And then after the last course, you go back into an ante room for coffee, and chatting to the person that I was sitting next to. We were the last to go back into the room. The aides on the door said, "It's your turn to go and speak to the Queen." What am I going to say to the Queen? There were a few more people in the room than had the lunch, and there were three ladies around the Queen. I wandered up. They sort of opened up and let me. I was standing opposite the Queen. She looked up at me and said, "Oh, you're the person that said if we ever seen you in a boat, we got our permission to shoot you." And I think, my God, what's going on here? Then conversations with the Duke afterwards was talking about all the gun laws that were going on at that time, and how odd that all that was. But yeah, an amazing experience. But that's sort of the ultimate of being recognised. Now, still 26 years on.
Closing questions, I guess. What would 25-year-old Steve ignore that maybe 60-year-old Steve knows matters most?
You think you know everything as a teenager in your early 20s. I think that was a great help within my sporting makeup. We had no history of winning Olympic gold medals. That we went through an average of winning 5 at Olympic Games. Totally different now. That's a lot to do with lottery funding and the more professionalism of the way that we go about it. That I wouldn't like to lose that drive. But they always say you learn as you get older, and that's a certain thing. So I wasn't the best athlete by the end of my career, especially with the 2 conditions I was dealing with. But the mental strength was so much more. I wish I had that earlier in my career, and perhaps I wouldn't have gone the first 8 years of not winning very much internationally. That people find that quite strange when you've won 5 consecutive Olympics. But there's a lot of races out there that I would have liked to have won that I didn't. And
then last question, what advice would you give men listening that they could do to maybe implement or change today to improve their health?
Especially with testosterone. The older you get, your testosterone levels do go down. Lack of energy, motivation, it could be a lack of testosterone. I don't know what my testosterone levels were when I was competing. We had a lot of, me especially, a lot of anti-doping testing. They don't give you the results. It wasn't above the levels, or else you would have heard about it, and it wouldn't have been a nice experience of that. So I don't know if I was low in my competing days. I would guess not, but it was in the range that it expected to be. That could be one of the reasons. So of depression, not enough get up and go, struggling from that point of view. Go and get tested. Go and have a simple blood test. Rule things out instead of sort of sitting there and pondering about things. Of the depression that I talked about of 9 years before I went and spoke to a GP about it. Don't leave it. Life's too short. Is that we've got to enjoy ourselves, and not everyone's going to enjoy every day of their life experience. But the better health that we have, then the better life that we will have for the people around us, not just ourselves as well. And so my advice with whatever you think that may be a problem, don't sit on it. Go and get it tested out, and more than likely it will be ruled out. And then that changes your outlook in life as well.
I agree. Steve, thanks so much for coming on. You've been brilliant. If people want to find out what you're up to or whatever you're doing next, how's the best way that they can see what you're doing?
We're doing dancing on ice last year. I had to go onto Instagram. So that's probably the best way of even though I always said I'd never do social media like that, but they wouldn't have me on the program if I didn't sign up. I do look at it quite often, but that's probably the best way of seeing what I'm doing. Contact. I still do have a website where I had a diary on what I was doing. I was away on holiday and got my house broken into. So don't people. So I'll tell people of what I've done and what may be coming up, but I won't be giving dates of what I'm doing and where.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks so much again. Cheers. If you enjoyed this episode of Man Alive, you would love this one. Go on, press it. Click now. Press it now.